The logic of failure for orthodontists and dentists. If you want to skip the frustrating years in running a practice, then this talk is for you. Today, we're going to explore something that might seem counterintuitive, how understanding failure can actually be your key to success. The logic of failure isn't about dwelling on mistakes. It's about understanding the patterns and the systems that cause even brilliant, hardworking doctors just like yourself to struggle with practice growth. As orthodontists and dentists, you've mastered the clinical side of your profession through years of training. But here's what's fascinating. The challenges that hold practices back rarely stem from clinical skills. They come from not understanding the hidden connections between marketing, sales, human capital and team dynamics, patient psychology, leadership, and practice operations. This presentation will help you see your practice as an interconnected system, showing you how to anticipate and prevent common pitfalls before they happen. Just like other great business owners, military leaders, coaches, stock traders, and strategists. By the end of our time together, you'll have a completely new perspective on practice growth, one that transforms problems into opportunities. This training is inspired by Dietrich Dorner's groundbreaking book, The Logic of Failure. Dorner studied why extremely intelligent people make poor decisions when managing complex systems. His findings are remarkably relevant to dental practices. Through our work with hundreds of practices, we've observed clear patterns in why some thrive while others plateau or even decline. The key insight is this. Most practice failures don't happen because of one big mistake. They occur through a series of seemingly small, interconnected decisions that create unexpected ripple effects. For example, a practice might choose marketing for a lower price to improve profitability, but this triggers a chain reaction. Fewer new patients leads to reduced team morale, causes lower quality of service that leads to poor reviews, resulting in even fewer patients. They didn't think about price versus cost. Understanding these patterns isn't just academic. It's the difference between constant firefighting and strategic growth. Let's dive into the most common patterns we see, and more importantly, how to break them. Let's talk about how doctors typically think about their practice problems in simple, linear terms. A casual series is like dominoes. One thing leads to the next in a straight line. Linear thinking assumes one event directly causes the next. An example is, we need better marketing, then more leads will come, and the practice will grow. Sounds logical, right? But this kind of thinking is exactly what gets practice owners in trouble. It's oversimplified. It ignores the complex web of relationships in your practice. Think about it. When was the last time anything in your practice worked in a perfect straight line? This is why so many doctors get frustrated when their practice isn't working the way they thought it would. They designed a nice space for patients. They did their best hiring people. They're great orthodontists. Now it should all be working according to the plan, right? Now, here's how successful practices actually work as interconnected networks, a web of causes and effects where changes in one area ripple across the entire system. Let's look at how the top 20% think. They know that better marketing means more leads, then increased call volume, which causes the team to be stressed. That leads to missed calls, then lost leads, resulting in no growth. See how different this is from one simple straight line we just looked at? This is why you can't just fix marketing without considering your team's capacity, training, and systems. Understanding these connections is what separates thriving practices from those stuck in constant firefighting mode. The practices that get this right are the ones that consistently grow, even in tough markets, even in a downturn. Dr. Sakowicz used to think in linear steps. He tried working with other marketing companies and none of them worked. Check out what he had to say.
We had tremendous growth in 2023, over 50%. It was a fantastic year.
How do you see HIP being a growth partner for your practice?
HIP is the fourth marketing company that I've worked with. The first three did not get any real results with advertisements. With HIP, it was the first time that I actually saw that we were getting people responding to the ads, but people that came into the office. And I was blown away by the effectiveness of the advertising efforts. You guys are far above and beyond any marketing company that I've ever worked with. I know it costs a lot. In my mind, as long as it's break even, it's worth it. Because even if I'm doing treatment and not making anything off of it, at the end of the day, I know it's building a reputation, it's getting more people to the door and working us towards that word of mouth, which is so important. There's a cost to growth. You got to put something in to get something out. Once I started talking more with Harrison, and now he got Zeta on board, which is great because we're doing more frequent check-ins. When I started having some conversation with James, I felt like that's really where the partnership began. I want to be a pioneer and pave the way to new strategies to staying ahead of the competition.
Let's look at some real examples. Hiring the cheapest marketing option. This happens all the time. Here's how doctors think it works. Cheaper marketing gets me the same results, and then the practice grows at a lower price. Simple and logical, right? That's what makes it so tempting. But here's what actually happens. Cheaper marketing gets you poor service and a poor strategy. That means leads don't convert, and everyone's frustrated, so then the practice agency hops. The real cost isn't the monthly fee, it's the opportunity cost of lost patients and no growth. We've seen hundreds of practices lose hundreds of thousands in potential revenue trying to save a few $100s a month. This isn't about marketing, it's about understanding the true cost of cheap decisions. Another common trap we see practices fall into, the simple thinking. You buy software, then there's almost no training, so the tool is underutilized. There's no buy-in from the people using it, which causes operational inefficiencies to persist, and then there's no measurable growth, and everyone's pissed, right? I see this so many times with tools like maybe Rhinogram or SmileSnap, or there's a lot of great tools out there, and people will tell me, yeah, Rhinogram sends me bad leads, bad patients. All Rhinogram is a piece of tech. It's a chat widget. It's a tool to get text messages from prospects or from patients. SmileSnap, virtual consults, whatever the tool may be. And all it is people who are interested in your services communicating with you. And yes, some people may not be ready to become a patient today. Some people may not answer their phone right away. But again, this doesn't mean they're a bad patient. The tool actually did its job. You just didn't know how to communicate with the prospect, or you didn't have the right expectation, or both. How many unused or partially used software systems does your practice have right now? The tool itself isn't the solution. It's how it fits into your entire practice ecosystem. Let's address two common complaints we hear. Number one is we're only getting bad leads. And number two, our leads never answer the phone. These statements reveal more about internal systems than external problems. They're symptoms, not causes. In fact, these complaints often come from practices sitting on gold mines of opportunity. They just can't see it. What is your locus of control? Those that always blame external factors typically are not successful. Those who take responsibility, saying, I'm responsible, they find a way, they analyze what needs to improve, they create new systems, they get new training, they implement, they evolve, they improve, and they get results. Let's face reality, and this might sting a bit. You don't answer unknown numbers either. Think about that for a second. You're expecting potential patients to do something you wouldn't even do yourself. Success depends on modern communication strategies. When we dig deeper into the bad leads complaint, here's what we typically find. Bad leads causes the team to give up and have a poor follow-up strategy, which causes missed opportunities and leads to frustration, resulting in no growth. The reality is this: most practices are leaving 30 to 50% of their potential growth on the table because they're stuck in outdated communication methods and outdated thinking. Your potential patients aren't bad leads, they're just communicating differently than you expect, than you want. The practices that adapt their communication strategies are the ones capturing this hidden growth. So you can continue to be self-sorted, you can want it to work your way, and you can continue to fail. Or you can look at what actually happens in the real world and adapt. The choice is always yours. One of the biggest mistakes we see is not understanding the time delay between action and results. Everyone wants instant results, but that's not how complex systems work. This impatience leads to abandoning strategies too early, constant strategy switching, team frustration, and inconsistent results. Just like orthodontic treatment takes time and follows a sequence, practice growth has its own timeline. You wouldn't rush a case, so why rush your practice growth? Success comes from understanding and respecting these natural time delays. People often fail to account for the time delay between actions and their consequences. Think of your practice like a garden. Some seeds sprout quickly, while others take longer to mature. Let's look at the key growth timelines. PPC ads can work as quickly as 2 to 4 weeks in some cases. They can be your quick wins, kind of like turning on a faucet. SEO takes at least 3 to 6 months, usually longer, and this is owning the space versus renting. It's long-term, like planting trees. Now, team training can take 1 to 2 months if you're lucky. I recommend immersion. So spend a lot of time on the front end and training, and then make sure whoever is being trained can do the role, teach the role to some degree as well. This is the human element. Habits take time. Something that takes a little longer is culture. A culture change can take 6 months or more. Culture is the deep roots. It can't be rushed, but it does create lasting strength and finally mindset. It usually changes within 1 to 10 years, and this is where true transformation happens. I hope for you that your mindset changes many times over a decade. The reality is sometimes it never changes. Don't let that be the case for you. Here's the key insight. Most practices fail because they don't respect these natural timelines. They pull up the seeds to check if they're growing, and they abandon strategies right before they're about to bear fruit. The practices that win are the ones that understand the rhythms of growth. They plant their seeds strategically, nurture them patiently, and trust the process. Let me share a critical insight that most practice management courses never talk about. Growth has a dark side. Think about this. What happens when you get too many new patients? What breaks in your practice when things move too fast? Where do things start to crack under pressure? Every practice has a natural growth capacity or a break point. Push beyond it too quickly and things literally start to break. Here's what nobody tells you. Success can actually create problems. The team gets overwhelmed. The team grows so fast you can't train people like you used to. Quality starts slipping. Systems start to break down. Culture gets strained. Communication falls apart. And patients have a bad experience and they tell people. This isn't about avoiding growth. It's about growing intelligently. The best practices don't just plan for success. They plan for the challenges that come with success. This is where systems thinking becomes your superpower. Because when you understand these dynamics, you can anticipate breaking points, strengthen systems before they crack, and grow smoothly instead of chaotically. Actions intended to achieve one goal often have unintended negative consequences for another goal. This is what we call the success trap. It's not that you did anything wrong, you just didn't see the entire picture. You succeeded at your goal, which was more patients, but created unexpected problems. What's fascinating is this: most practices focus on the first effect, more patients. Few consider the second effect, team stress, and almost none plan for the third effect, which is the quality drops, and then they're blindsided by the fourth effect, which is negative reviews. This is why simple solutions often make things worse. Not because they're bad ideas, but because we don't consider the ripple effects. The solution isn't to stop marketing, it's to understand and prepare for these cascading effects. Think like a chess grandmaster. Don't just make good moves, make moves that prevent problems 3 steps ahead. And remember, increasing marketing without team readiness is like pouring more water into a leaky bucket. The more you add, the faster it drains out. Fix the leaks first, then you can fill it to the top. We doubled our practice over a weekend, said Dr. Carter Thomas. Hear what he has to say.
And I was just an asshole. So I was like, man, we're spending $10,000 a month. It had been like 4 months of a hit or whatever it was. I was just in work, and Harvey's like, yeah, man, we can't afford this. It's not working. We did nothing. We just hired them, and we said it, and we forgot it. We didn't change the way we structure our fees. We didn't change the way we presented cases to patients. We didn't change our consults. It took a lot of mindset change on mine and Dr. Harvey's part to be willing to do what HIP said with our orth chart. We did it, and it's working. We've doubled our practice over a weekend because we're doing what these guys said.
Anticipating problems before they happen. Let me share a powerful insight. The best doctors aren't the ones who are great at solving problems. They're the ones who prevent problems from happening in the first place. Think about your clinical work. If you are a dentist, you don't wait for cavities, you prevent them. If you're an orthodontist, you don't wait for patients to tell you they aren't compliant, you can see it, you get ahead of it. And you don't wait for emergencies, you plan for them. So why do we treat practice management differently? Most practices operate in reactive mode. Wait for problems, scramble to fix them, hope they don't happen again, repeat the cycle. But elite practices operate in proactive mode. Anticipate challenges, build preventative systems, create early warning signals, strengthen weak points before they break. Here's the game-changing mindset shift. Stop asking yourself, how do we fix this? Start asking, how do we prevent this? Because here's the truth. The most expensive problems are the ones you don't see coming. Think of this like insurance for your practice growth. A small investment in prevention today saves you massive headaches for tomorrow. The best protection against failure is to anticipate it. This reminds me of what Jack Welch did at GE. He said, if there is even a 3% chance something could go wrong, plan for it. Think about that mindset for a second. Most people wait for problems to become likely. Great leaders like Jack Welch plan for what's possible. In your practice, this means, what if your best team member leaves? What if Google changes the algorithm? What if a competitor opens next door, and what if insurance reimbursements drop? What if the economy takes a downturn? Small probability? Maybe. Devastating if you're not prepared? Absolutely. This isn't about being paranoid, it's about being prepared. The practices that thrive in tough times aren't the ones who got lucky. They're the ones who planned while others hoped. Remember, hope is not a strategy, preparation is. Instead of putting out fires, let's build fire prevention systems. Let's look at the 5 most common failure points in practices. Number 1, missed lead follow-up. Think of leads like oxygen to your practice. You can have the best marketing in the world, but if you can't breathe it in, you suffocate. Number 2, untrained teams. Your systems are only as strong as your people running them. Would you let someone do clinical work without proper training? Then why do we do it with practice growth? Number 3, poor patient communication. In today's world, it's not just what you say, it's how and when you say it. The practices that master this thrive. Number 4, inefficient scheduling. This isn't just about filling chairs, it's about optimizing the heartbeat of your practice. Are you looking at timing for each part of the consult? Seeing what can be better? Are you still running hour-long consults? Are you still spending too much time with patients? All things to think about. Number 5, inadequate tracking. You can't improve what you don't measure, and you can't prevent what you don't see coming. Here's the key insight. Each of these failures is predictable and preventable. The question isn't if these challenges will come, it's whether you'll be ready when they do. A practice with strong systems can handle almost any challenge. A practice without systems can be broken by almost any challenge. This is where everything changes, where problems become opportunities. Think about your clinical training. Every case taught you something. Every challenge made you better, every failure made you stronger. But somehow you forgot this when it comes to practice management and growth. Instead of learning from failures, you hide them, you blame others, you repeat them, you don't even admit failures, you get frustrated, and you give up. I see it all the time. The most successful practices have a different approach. They treat every failure as a research project, every problem as a learning opportunity, every setback as a setup for a comeback. Here's the million-dollar question. What if every failure in your practice was actually showing you where your systems need to be strengthened, where your team needs training, where your communication needs improving, where your next breakthrough will come from? Because here's the truth. Failures aren't stop signs. People often fail to learn from experience because they don't analyze their failures properly. This quote hits hard because it's so true for practices. Think about your last setback. Did you really analyze what happened? Did you dig deep into the root causes? Did you document the lessons learned? Did you create systems to prevent it from happening again? Or did you just move on? Here's what's fascinating about failure. The same failure that crushes one practice makes another practice stronger, better. Isn't that fascinating? The difference isn't in the failure itself, it's in how you respond to the failure. It's like clinical cases. Bad outcomes can teach you more than good ones in some cases. Complications make you a better doctor. Challenges force you to innovate, but only if you study them, only if you learn from them, only if you use them to get better. This isn't about beating yourself up, it's about being honest enough to learn and grow. Let me ask you something. Do you think Tom Brady became great without watching game film? Do you think the best surgeons don't review their cases? So why aren't we reviewing our practice performance? Here are the 4 critical areas you need to analyze. Number 1, secret shop. What's really happening when a patient opts in on your website or Facebook ad? How is your team performing? Where are the gaps between training and reality? You can ask us to secret shop you and we will deliver a full report. Number 2, new patient calls, the moment of truth, new patient calls. Are we converting opportunities? Is our communication effective? Are we losing patients before they even come in? Are we handling objections properly? Are we setting expectations, which leads us into the new patient consult? Are we presenting treatment effectively? Are we connecting with patients? Are we addressing real concerns? Are we getting an emotional response? And then number 4 is the pending process, your follow-up system. Are leads falling through the cracks? Is our timing right? Are we using the right communication channels? Here's the key insight. Just like the NFL players review every play, champions study their performance. They learn from every interaction. They improve every process. Now we're moving from theory to action. Let's talk about how to actually implement this in your practice. Think about building a house. You don't start with the roof, you don't start with the walls, you start with the foundation. Your practice growth is exactly the same. First, we map out the current systems. Then we identify the weak points, and finally, we strengthen the foundation. Here's what's fascinating. Most practices want to jump straight to the tactics. Give me more marketing. Show me the latest technique. What's the newest technology? But sustainable growth isn't about tactics. It's about building systems that scale smoothly, prevent problems, support growth, and strengthen over time. Here's the truth. A practice with strong systems and okay marketing will outperform a practice with great marketing and weak systems every single time. Before you step on the gas, let's make sure your engine is ready. Assess team capacity. Are you currently maxed out? Can your team handle more volume? Where are the breaking points? Don't double your marketing if your team is already overwhelmed. Document systems. What's in your head needs to be on paper. Create clear, repeatable processes. Make success transferable because you can't scale what you can't teach. Define training needs. What skills are missing? Where do people struggle? What support is needed? Growth exposes every weakness in your training. Prepare technology for growth. Is your software ready for more growth? Are your tools being fully utilized? Do you have the right tech stack? The right tools multiply your team's effectiveness. Here's the reality check though. Most practices fail their growth readiness test, not because they're bad practices, but because they never took the test in the first place. Readiness isn't about being perfect, it's about being prepared. Let's hear some stories to shift our mindset.
In The Logic of Failure, there's a fascinating story about a train station simulation. The station managers kept complaining about getting the wrong kind of passengers. They wanted business travelers who knew exactly where they were going and when. But what they were getting were tourists, commuters, people who needed direction, what they saw as unqualified passengers. The successful station managers discovered something interesting. Those quote-unquote unqualified passengers were actually generating more revenue when properly served. The tourists bought food, shopped at the station stores, and often upgraded their tickets when shown the benefits of better service. Here's what's interesting about orthodontic practices. Every parent who reaches out is someone who is thinking about their smile or their child's. They might be at a different stage of readiness, but they're all potential patients. The practices that thrive don't wait for perfect leads. They build systems to guide people through the decision process. Let's take a look at Dr. Johnson's practice in Dallas. They used to think only 20% of their leads were qualified. Then they changed their perspective. Instead of judging lead quality, they focused on their phones and consultation process. And it turns out when they treated every inquiry as an opportunity to educate and guide, they went from 3 starts to 20 each month. Same leads, different approach. There's a remarkable experiment from The Logic of Failure about a research laboratory. The scientists were convinced they had bad samples because their experiments weren't producing results. They kept demanding new samples, better samples, different samples. But when an outside observer came in, they discovered something crucial. The scientists were trying to communicate with these samples the same way they did 20 years ago. The world had changed, but their methods hadn't. It's fascinating how this parallels with what we see in orthodontic practices. When was the last time you answered a call from an unknown number? Yet we expect our leads to do exactly that. Take Dr. Moore. They were frustrated with their bad leads until they looked at their own communication habits. They realized they never answer unknown calls either. They wait for voicemails or text. When they updated their approach using our follow-up system with Practice Beacon, they stepped into the modern age. Suddenly, these bad leads started responding. Same leads, different communication strategy. One of my favorite studies from The Logic of Failure involves a factory manager simulation. The participants kept complaining about poor production quality, demanding better raw materials. But they refused to look at their quality control data that was readily available in their computer system. When they finally checked the data, they discovered the raw materials were fine. They were losing quality in their process, not their inputs. This reminds me of a practice in Florida. The doctor was convinced their leads were terrible, wouldn't respond, and wouldn't show up. Then we asked a simple question: how many calls are you missing each day? They were certain that it wasn't many. We finally checked their VoIP system and discovered they were missing 40% of incoming calls. It's like a business owner saying their marketing isn't working while their front door is locked half the day. The data was there all along. They just hadn't looked at it. When they started monitoring their phone data and adjusting their staffing and training on our script, their lead quality mysteriously improved. In The Logic of Failure, there's a study about sports team management. Some managers would make decisions about player performance without ever watching game films. They based everything on in-game scores and statistics. It's remarkable how similar this is to practices that don't review their phone calls. It's like trying to coach a football team without watching any game film. You're making decisions based on the final score without ever understanding how the game was played. I remember working with a practice in West Virginia. The doctor was frustrated with their schedule rate, but when we listened to their calls, we discovered their team was accidentally discouraging consultations by giving too much or even wrong information over the phone. And one team member was even quoting prices before building value. They would never have discovered this without reviewing calls.
The power of these stories isn't in the telling, it's in the transformation they represent. Every practice has these moments waiting to happen. Every challenge has a breakthrough hiding within it. Every system can be optimized. The only question is, which story will your practice write? Success comes from understanding systems, anticipating failures, and adapting to change. Let me share one final insight that ties everything together. Think about the difference between good doctors and great doctors. Good doctors treat problems. Great doctors prevent them. The same principle applies to running your practice. Reactive management is fighting fires, solving crises, making rush decisions, living in constant stress and always playing catch up. But proactive management is building systems, anticipating challenges, making strategic decisions, creating calm and control, and staying ahead of the curve. Success isn't about working harder, it's about thinking differently. It's about understanding your practice as a system, anticipating challenges before they arise, building processes that prevent problems, creating scalable and sustainable growth, and adapting intelligently to change. Because here's the ultimate truth. The most successful practices aren't the ones with the fewest problems, they're the ones that handle challenges systematically. Your practice will face challenges. That's not the question. The question is, will you be ready for them? We not only do marketing, we are way more than marketing. We specifically help orthodontists with being preemptive and preeminent. We fix the links in the chain that stunt growth, the things that most practices miss, so that marketing never becomes a problem. It never becomes a wasted investment or a pain point. We look forward to speaking with you soon. Thanks so much for watching.